Scientists create a healthier butter-like spread made from 80% water. The whole point of nutrition is to ingest a food that supplies the proteins, the fats, the essential vitamins, etc. Not to create, because we're so ravenously hungry, water spreads for low-calorie food. All right, so if seed oils and Crisco are not a good example of how laboratory food can make us sick, it's quite sad that we are still unable to acknowledge in the scientific community that the seed oils cause many of the modern diseases. It's highly inflammatory, as I repeat over and over. It's highly oxidized during the processing. The polyunsaturated itself is due to the lack of the saturated bonds, is quite a non-stable and brittle fat compared to a saturated or even a monounsaturated fat. So this is what science is doing. This is a money maker. This is the motivation, unfortunately, by a lot of scientists. It's to make a name for themselves. This new process that they boast as a good thing, that is 80% water. This is what happens because we're on a calorie diet, a high carbohydrate diet. Since carbohydrates are the only use for them is to create adenosine triphosphate, ATP production. That's the fuel. That's the currency of our body. Now, a high ATP producing diet, okay, will always overshoot the amount of energy available, and therefore that energy will go into a stored form of energy, which is adipose tissue, which is fat. This massive epidemic of obesity, of metabolic disorders, of diabetes, the increasing cancer rates, the increasing Alzheimer's and dementia and Parkinson's disease that we're seeing with the modern diseases now. We have to look back and realize that only a century ago, these were not issues that we were dealing with on an epidemic proportion. Therefore, instead of creating new foods to deal with the problem, we should be eliminating the new foods that have been introduced within the last century when we were getting sick. It just makes much more sense. And there are not that many changes that have occurred. There was a massive micronutrient switch from a more higher protein and higher fat diet to a high carbohydrate diet, and a reduction in saturated fats, a reduction in animal sources of nutrition. When this occurred, okay, this increased the obesity and the diabetes and many of the metabolic functions. However, if you do some research into cancer, while there is a genetic component to it, a genetic predisposition to certain cancers within people, we have to understand that it is also a mitochondrial dysfunction. It is a metabolic disorder. Therefore, the metabolism and how a cancer cell survives is quite limited and different, and it's a dysfunctional way to ferment and get energy. I'm going into a little bit of detail about the cancer because during the fermentation process, glucose is required. Therefore, supplying a high carbohydrate diet. And we know that early on, they weren't taking into consideration really the simple sugars. Juices that are just simple sugars have the same reaction as Coca-Cola or Orange Crush, right? So they didn't realize that the mitochondria always having to deal with this massive load of glucose, which the body was not used to having the luxury of having so much during our hunter and gatherer days. We were more carnivorous back then. The reason I go into a little bit of detail for this talk about the cancer and the glucose is that, again, I think that the micronutrient switch that occurred between the 50s and was really enforced with the guidelines in the 70s, the low-fat guidelines, I believe that that is a dietary cause for a lot of the metabolic issues that we're seeing and a lot of the obesity. Now, the obesity itself is an inflammatory process. High insulin due to high glucose in the diet is an inflammatory response. It's an inflammatory situation occurring within your body. That's the first thing. The second aspect in the last 1,000 years was the introduction of these seed oils. I have plenty of videos about the toxic seed oils, where they are, why they're toxic, and where to avoid them and how to fix your omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. Therefore, the second aspect, not related to the micronutrients, was the high omega-6, the oxidizing diet, the inflammatory molecule, the brittle polyunsaturated poisons that are refined and fabricated, and they're literally putting it in everything. If there is a company that needs to put a fat, they are not putting animal fats in there, and they're not putting olive oil or coconut or any of the cold press. They're putting the solvents, the oxidized seed oils in your food. This is the second reason why the last century we have been extremely sick. Obviously there's environmental toxins, right? There's preservatives that are put in there. There's all sorts of weird ingredients in the stuff that we use, from deodorant to processed foods, the preservative, everything. Who knows what those things are doing? I mean, lavender is estrogenic. Go figure. The red dye that they put to color some of the food is estrogenic. A lot of the chemicals are create goiters, play with your hormones. I mean, there's a lot of other stuff here. This is multifactorial, this modern disease, but there must be some major contributing factors. And I believe that the seed oils, okay, completely foreign, never ever would we be able to consume that much omega-6. We are getting our omega-6 and 3 through the ratios within the animal sources. Okay, and then after eventually, let's say, you know, we know during biblical times there was olive oil and stuff like that. This was a very simple cold press, right? And I'm sure they weren't scarfing it down by the gallons like we're doing with canola. But for my channel, I want to really just stick to the diet aspect. Okay, and when I read this article about this new artificial water-based spread, okay, preventing us, literally saying, don't eat butter, don't take that grass-fed milk from a ruminant animal that's been grazing on grass that is full of fat-soluble nutrients, good protein, wonderful fat, okay, don't give that. Hey, don't churn that milk into butter. It's gonna kill you. What we're gonna do is we're gonna spin water with all sorts of weird freaking mechanisms and make you a water spread, okay, that is 80% water and 20% toxic. I guarantee you. Let's actually get into the article. As delicious as butter is, adding flavor and texture to almost any food, it's not the healthiest thing to smear on toast or corn on the cob. Some vegetable-based oil spreads like margarine are considered a healthier alternative, but food scientists at Cornell University have come up with what could be the ultimate butter substitute made primarily from water. Yum, yum, yum. So in the literature, I have found absolutely nothing that validates margarine or any of the seed oils as a healthier alternative. All that they are basing this on is that this non-scientific belief that saturated fat will clog your arteries and cholesterol also will go and clog your arteries. So any of the animal fats that contain cholesterol in these animal source nutritions that do have saturated fat, this is what they're basing the idea that margarine is healthy, and because butter contains these things that it's very unhealthy. So it's based on an old paradigm that has been disproven. I don't want to go over and waste too much time because I've gone over and over and actually used the same slide. But again, dietary saturated fat is not associated with increased risk of coronary vascular heart disease. Here in a recently published meta-analysis of 43 cohorted or nested case studies. So they came to the conclusion, studies up until July 1st, 2018 did not find that higher saturated fat intake is associated with a higher risk of cardiovascular disease events. This is the first study to examine the effects of total dietary fat intake and the intake of specific fatty acids on coronary vascular risks, okay? And what they find is that saturated fat has nothing to do with any of the issues that they're claiming. Therefore, all of the recommendations to reduce the foods that are high in saturated fat, that actually allow saturated the saturated fat in there to allow the fat soluble vitamins to be optimally absorbed. So in relation to fat, the only thing that you should avoid is the hydrogenated, the trans fats. Those were toxic, and they were processed man-made. We made them. That's why they suck. And from there, you have to realize that omega-6 is not innately bad. It's an essential fat. We need it. It's just that we're over-consuming it, and that's throwing off our omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, and that is the issue. So therefore, when you are consuming fats, do realize that the omega-6 are not evil, but we do have to keep those ratios in check. And by avoiding all packaged food, by avoiding all seed oils, and then going after the essential fats within animal source nutrition, especially going after a couple of times during the week, those fattier fishes to get the omega-3, that's how you're gonna fix it. Typically, high internal phase emulsions, where water is the primary ingredient, don't look like something you'd want to spread on food. However, with the addition of a few natural ingredients that work as stabilizers, including beeswax, further increasing the ratio of water to oil ends up creating a stable mix that has the consistency of a creamy butter-like spread, such as margarine, but even healthier. Now, what they mean by healthier is that they've created something that is low in saturated fat, low in cholesterol, that is low in calories, and so devoid of any real nutrients that it has to be fortified. Fortified is basically throwing supplements into a fake food. So the reason they gotta invent these kind of water spreads, these low calorie spreads, is because the general population with a low-fat diet is extremely ravenous. They're hungry. We need fat. We need animal fat. And when you deprive the human body of that, it will not allow you to feel satisfied for very long. If you are not supplying the essential fatty acids, if you're not supplying the protein that the body feels it needs for that day, if you're not eating enough saturated fat to get the fat soluble vitamins in there, your body will keep on giving you signals to eat. It just wants to get its quota, and it will stimulate hunger so that it gets what is essential for it to function. A tablespoon of butter, which is made up of 84% fat and 16% water, measures in at around 11 grams of fat and almost 100 calories. But a tablespoon of this new artificial spread, which is made up of 80% water by comparison, is just 2.8 grams of fat and only 25.2 calories. It looks and feels like softened butter, and according to the Cornell food scientist, it could be further enhanced with vitamins, milk or plant-based proteins, and other additives so it tastes like butter while being highly nutritional. Okay, look, in the same paragraph, please do not say that we can enhance it by actually adding vitamins and adding proteins and other additives, and that makes it highly nutritional. No, butter is highly nutritional because it has all that stuff, and it's not fake. The spread would potentially not only be a healthier alternative to butter, but like the Impossible Burger and other plant-based meats, Widespread adoption could help reduce the country's dependence on milk-producing cattle and the toll that raising those animals takes on the land and the environment. Okay, look, if you want to talk about how animal agriculture affects the world, all right, don't listen to me. Don't listen to this idiot on the article. Don't listen to vegans. Go to people that actually work in the industry. Okay, this gentleman is a soil specialist. He's a ruminant specialist. Okay, he deals with animal agriculture. He knows the science. He knows the facts. He knows the truth. He has the actual scientific data that gives you the proper numbers. I'm not going to go too much into that. I just showed you the picture of Peter Ballersteed or Stead, and you go watch this guy. Watch a couple of his videos and you will know the truth. Guys, animals have been on Earth, okay? They have been, ruminant animals have existed as long as we have existed, probably even more. These animals eat cellulose, which is completely useless to us, grass. We can't do anything with it, okay, nutritionally. The ruminant animals take that cellulose and they make wonderful animal source proteins, essential fats, essential vitamins, fat and water soluble. These animals are not competing for resources. The reason now that animal agriculture is not really helpful is that we're not making the animals, the cows, eat their traditional diet, which is grass. They have them in barns and they're feeding them grain and stuff like that. Now it's not that simple. It's a lot more complex. Okay, it's not just black and white like that. But if you look at the facts, if you go do the research, I was astounded to find that animal agriculture is beneficial. It replenishes the soil. The animals eat the grass. They don't pick out the roots. They just eat the grass. So when the grass is long, it has really nice, long roots. When the animal comes and chomps up the top, then there's no need for those roots. And therefore those roots die off and they become organic matter that's been added into the soil. And then after the sun makes them grow again, and then after the roots go deeper again and enlarge, and then the animal comes and chomps on the top, and again, those roots die. When the animals are outside grazing, obviously they're peeing, they're pooping. That also is adding organic matter and nutrients to the soil, replenishing the soil. So we're always, there's not enough animals to feed the whole world. There's not enough plants to feed the whole world. There's going to have to be some omnivorous, blending of the plant and animal agriculture. But I think that the sustainability will occur where there will be a rotation where farmers will kind of be all hybrid farmers. They might be for a few years using soya and corn. They're plant agriculturalists, and then after there's a rotation as the soil becomes depleted, then there's no more plant agriculture there, and it becomes roaming ruminants to replenish it. And all of these farms should not be isolated to dairy, to plant agriculture. It should be totally refabricated, rehauled, redone, so that they're hybrid farms, so that each farm is mimicking more the nature and the natural blueprint of the ecological system. Now, plant agriculture, the irony of that is that it's not green, okay? It's not sustainable. Going and cutting down a forest, okay, cutting down all the biodiversity, displacing all of the animals, taking away all the biodiversity so that they starve, okay, put them on the outskirts of where they used to, inhabit, trying to drink the water, but now it's full of pesticides and they're dying, okay. The harvest of the crops, you don't think that there's a lot of animals that are mulched up in the harvester? There is death anytime food chain is involved, okay, whether it's the soil that's eating us, when we die, or the plants eating the soil, or the remnants eating the plants, or us eating freaking everything. I mean, the vegans eat dirt because they get their B12 from it. Joke. Well, maybe. I've literally had vegans tell me, well, technically we used to eat vegetables and there were dirt on them and we got our B12. I was like, okay, you have your bowl of dirt, my friend. No one's arguing that butter isn't delicious and that spreadable alternatives don't quite nail the texture and flavor of the real thing. But they come quite close, and the advantage to using a non-butter spread far outweighs the benefits of dropping a few tablespoons of real butter in your coffee every morning. That is a really weird ending. Who the hell puts real butter in your coffee every morning? The first time I've ever heard of that is Bulletproof Coffee within the keto community. I've never heard people just putting butter in coffee. That was a little slip. There's that little bias that's right there. It's only keto. It is only keto, so that the next person that reads this and starts with keto, perhaps they're having a little bit more fat in their coffee. Oops, that's bad. That is dangerous. Just eat the water spread. So let's finish off this video with a little study here looking at butter. So is butter back? A systemic review and meta-analysis of butter consumption and risk of cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and total mortality. For type 2 diabetes, 4 studies including 11 country-specific cohorts reported on butter consumption and onset of type 2 diabetes, including over 200,000 participants and almost 24,000 incident cases. In both randomized effects and fixed effects meta-analysis, butter consumption was associated actually with a lower incidence of type 2 diabetes, with 4% lower risk per daily 14-gram serving. Jumping around, looking at some of the highlights of the study. Current dietary recommendations on butter and dairy fat are largely based upon predicted effects. Imagined effects then, what they think they know about something. So based upon the predicted effects of specific individual nutrients rather than actual observed health effects. That's what they predict based on wrong assumptions and rather than observed health effects. Like, that's the first step of science, that observation. They're like, screw that. Let's just go with the predictions. A meta-analysis evaluating dairy consumption and coronary vascular disease found no association between butter consumption and stroke. So no cause, but not only no cause, not even an association. So the study concludes, together, these findings suggest relatively small or neutral associations of butter consumption with long-term health. What a stark difference between this fact and what that article says, that it's far outweighing, just far outweighing the benefits of butter, right? Yeah. Ignorance. Again, dairy milk, butter, these are not new foods that have recently been added to the human food chain. These are old traditional foods that humans have been consuming for hundreds and thousands of years. So we have to take into account that these modern issues had nothing to do with butter or any of the animal sources of nutrition. We've been consuming those and we were healthy. All of a sudden now, these old ancient foods, okay, that scientifically I'm saying are extremely nutritious, all of a sudden these things are becoming toxic in the body? Come on, let's go, guys. The seed oils are man-made. Within nature, it'd be never possible. It'd be impossible for us to consume that much omega-6 from seeds. Yet it's a moneymaker. And they rather just bypass the whole production line for feeding these animals so that we can eat them. They rather just make everybody consume grain instead of, that middleman, the ruminant animals that literally change cellulose into the most nutritious bioavailable form that humans can ever eat. They're like, no, just let's convince them that the animal sources of nutrition are crap, and let's just get them eating a grain diet. We'll be making money on them with all the prepackaged fake foods, with the seed oils, with the soya and the high fructose corn syrup. And then after, since we're all affiliated with big pharma and big food, then we can just support all of these symptoms of illness that are appearing with our pharmaceuticals. It's a win-win-win. The human becomes the cash cow, and we become the product that few people on the top of the pyramid are going to make money off of. They'll thrive on our basically slave grain cow diet. Let's finish off the video with some of the health benefits of butter. So butter is rich in the most easily absorbable form of vitamin A necessary for thyroid and adrenal function, as well as many other things. So the retinol form, not the beta carotene form. It contains different kind of fatty acids like lauric acid. It's important in treating fungal infections and candida. So some of the fatty acids specifically have some antimicrobial, antiviral properties. They contain antioxidants that protect against free radical damage. Don't forget, guys, it makes much more sense to reduce oxidative stress by eliminating foods high in seed oils, processed food, and then just allow the natural antioxidant pathway that neutralizes these radical oxygen species that can damage our body. Just allow our body the natural process of neutralizing those. You don't necessarily have to go after all these outside antioxidants. And this is something that they try and push the fruits and vegetables on, antioxidants. It's like, no. Eliminate the oxidative stress in your life and then allow normal pathway, an endogenous system within you to neutralize the oxidants that occur just through maintaining the body alive. We do produce byproducts. That's normal. You don't have to go outside nutritionally to try and find these antioxidants. However, there just happens to be, not only in fruits and vegetables, but even in animal sources, some antioxidants. All right, won't go into too many details about what antioxidants do. There's a wide variety of things that it does. It's also a great source of vitamin E, vitamin K, vitamin K2, which can be kind of challenging sometimes to get in our diet. Don't forget that we have, the high-fat dairy that allows that the absorption of those vitamins. Anytime you are eating a fat-soluble vitamin without fat, you're not absorbing it, guys. Just remember that. We need the fat. It's very rich in a source of vital minerals and selenium. The saturated fat in the butter has also a strong anti-tumor and anti-cancer property. Again, another fatty acid, which is, there's some evidence that it could have a potent anti-cancer agent, muscle building and immune booster. There's the vitamin D that's also there, found in butter. And vitamin D actually is essential for calcium to be absorbed. So if you're eating calcium and you don't have the D3, it's not helping the absorption of that calcium into your body. And as well, if you don't have K2, calcium will not be signaled to deposit itself in the appropriate areas like your teeth and bones. So vitamin K2 is very important. Like I just mentioned, protection against tooth decay. So obviously the calcium as well as the K2 and the other nutrients allow calcium to go in the teeth and the bones, go in the right direction. So we have a good source of calcium within dairy milk and butter. So the benefits of milk does not stop with what I've listed. There's many more things, and we can go into greater detail on each aspect, and this could last forever. The point is that milk is very nutritious. Butter is very healthy. It is not a fake food like margarine. Margarine is a fake food, guys. It's a processed food. It's seed oils. It's hydrogenated. It's even more toxic than the non-hydrogenated forms. So please do not hesitate to use butter. Stay away from these useless water spreads. They're not healthy.